The massive crystalline chamber hummed with quiet energy as beings from across the known galaxy settled into their designated seats. The Galactic Council met only once every 3 standard years, and today's agenda included reviewing membership applications from 12 primitive species seeking protection under galactic law. Council Prime Vextar shuffled through the preliminary reports with his 6-fingered hands, his blue-scaled face showing mild boredom. After 3 centuries of these meetings, he had seen it all. Young civilizations would arrive, trembling and desperate, begging for protection from stronger neighbors. They would offer their resources, their labor, sometimes even their freedom in exchange for safety under the Council's wing. Next application, Vextar announced, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. Species designation, human. Planet of origin, Earth. Technological level, barely space-capable. Several council members chuckled. The reptilian delegates from Zirion Prime made hissing sounds that passed for laughter among their kind. The crystalline beings from the Andromeda sector chimed like broken glass. Another backward species coming to grovel. The great doors at the chamber's entrance began to open with a deep, resonating tone. Vextar expected to see the usual sight, a small delegation of terrified primitives, perhaps accompanied by a few outdated robots or crude mechanical devices. Instead, 3 humans walked through the doorway with calm, measured steps. The woman leading the group was small by galactic standards, barely reaching the chest height of most species present. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore simple clothes that looked almost primitive compared to the elaborate robes and biosuits worn by other delegates. Behind her walked 2 others, a man and another woman, each carrying modest data tablets that seemed laughably basic next to the floating holographic displays surrounding them. Honored council members, the lead human said, and her words appeared instantly in 17 different languages on the translation screens around the chamber. I am Ambassador Kim Yuna of Earth. These are my colleagues, Cultural Attaché Park Minho and Strategic Advisor Lee Hanna. We come seeking partnership, not protection. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Partnership? Vextar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for amusement among his people. Partnership, he said, leaning forward in his towering seat. Your species has barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Your largest ships carry fewer than 1,000 beings. What could you possibly offer the Council? Kim Yuna smiled. It was a simple expression, but somehow it made several Council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. There was something in that smile that suggested she knew something they did not. Understanding, Prime Vextar, she replied calmly. We understand many things. Park Minho stepped forward, his simple data tablet suddenly projecting a holographic display that made the Altrian trade minister's breathing apparatus flutter nervously. The display showed detailed charts and graphs, all focusing on the Altrian Federation's economy. We understand that your people's mineral extraction rights on Kepler 442b expire in 6 months, Kim Yuna continued, her voice never losing its polite tone. We understand that this will leave your primary trading partner without their most valuable export, causing a significant economic disruption in this sector. Vextar's scaled face paled to a lighter shade of blue. The mining rights on Kepler 442b were classified information, known only to the highest levels of Altrian government. How could these primitives possibly know about it? We understand, Lee Hanna added, activating her own tablet, that the Crystalline Consortium has been struggling with fungal contamination in their bioships. The infection has already spread to 40% of their fleet, but they have been hiding this information to prevent panic in their territories. The crystalline delegates stopped their musical chiming abruptly. The contamination was their most closely guarded secret, something that could destroy their reputation as the galaxy's premier biological engineers. We understand, Park Minho said, displaying another set of data, that 3 council species are currently on the verge of resource wars that could destabilize this entire sector within the next 2 years. The hegemony is running out of fuel for their war machines. The Trade Federation is facing rebellion in their outer colonies. The theocracy is dealing with growing religious unrest. The chamber fell completely silent. These were not random guesses or lucky insights. The humans were displaying detailed, accurate intelligence about the most sensitive political and economic situations in known space. How do you know these things? Demanded War Chief Kralthor of the Zephyrian Empire, his massive frame rising from his seat like a mountain of armor and muscle. We have been watching, Lee Hanna said quietly. Learning. Preparing. For how long? Vextar asked, though he was beginning to suspect he did not want to know the answer. Since your first radio broadcasts reached our system 93 years ago, Kim Yuna replied. We have been studying every transmission, every trade agreement, every diplomatic exchange. We know your languages, your customs, your fears, and your needs better than many of you know them yourselves. The massive chamber that housed the most powerful beings in the galaxy had become as quiet as a tomb. The implications of what the humans were saying slowly sank in. These were not desperate primitives seeking protection. These were predators who had been studying their prey for nearly a century before making their move. What do you want from us? Vextar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kim Yuna's smile grew slightly wider. Nothing you are not willing to give freely. We want to trade, to learn, to grow together. We want to help solve the problems that divide you. We want to be partners. And if we refuse? Asked the trade minister, though his voice shook as he spoke. Then you refuse, Kim Yuna said with a shrug. We will continue to exist, to learn, to grow. The galaxy is large enough for all of us. But we think you will find that cooperation serves everyone's interests better than conflict. Council Prime Vextar looked around the chamber at his fellow delegates. He saw fear in their eyes, the same fear he felt in his own hearts. These humans had demonstrated something that no species in galactic history had ever achieved. They had learned everything there was to know about their potential enemies before ever making contact. And the most terrifying part was that they had done it not through spying or warfare, but through simple, patient observation and analysis. The vote to grant Earth preliminary membership status was unanimous, though not because the council members admired humanity's achievements. They voted out of a growing, uncomfortable realization that they were no longer the apex predators of galactic politics. The age of human diplomacy had begun. The red warning lights bathed the mining station's command center in an angry glow as 300 Zephyrian warships materialized at the edge of the Tau Ceti system. Colony Administrator Zhao Wei gripped the metal railing of the observation deck, watching through the reinforced windows as the bioships arranged themselves in perfect attack formation around their peaceful settlement. The Zephyrian vessels looked like enormous insects made of metal and flesh. Their hulls pulsed with crimson bioluminescence that served as both communication system and intimidation display. Each ship was easily 10 times larger than anything in the colony's small defense fleet, and their organic weapons could strip a planet bare in hours. They are demanding unconditional surrender, Communications Officer Jung Su reported from her station, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. Standard Zephyrian doctrine. They will enslave the population and strip mine the planet until nothing remains. Zhao Wei closed his eyes for a moment. 15,000 miners and their families lived on this station and the planet below. Men, women, and children who had come here seeking a better life among the stars, only to face the galaxy's most feared warriors. The colony's defense ships were little more than armed cargo haulers, useless against a proper war fleet. Sir, Jung Su called out, we are receiving a transmission from an incoming Earth vessel. Ambassador Kim Yuna is requesting permission to dock. One ship? Zhao Wei asked, unable to believe what he was hearing. Against 300 Zephyrian warships. The human diplomatic vessel was so small it barely registered on their sensors. It looked like a metal egg compared to the massive bioships surrounding the system, and it carried no visible weapons. Zhao Wei watched in amazement as the tiny craft flew directly toward the Zephyrian flagship, completely ignoring the hundreds of organic weapons tracking its movement. Every being in the galaxy knew about Zephyrian military might. Their warriors stood 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor that could stop plasma fire. They had conquered 17 systems in the past decade alone, and they had never once accepted surrender or shown mercy to their enemies. The strong ruled, the weak served, and there were no exceptions to this law. War Chief Kralthor received the human ambassador in his throne room deep within the flagship's living hull. The chamber walls pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm like a massive heartbeat, and the air smelled of metal and organic decay. Kralthor sat on a throne carved from the bones of his enemies, surrounded by his most elite warriors, each one a veteran of countless battles. The human woman who entered his domain looked impossibly small and fragile. She wore simple diplomatic clothing with no armor or weapons visible, and she walked with calm, measured steps across the bone floor as if she were entering a peaceful conference room instead of the heart of a war machine. You come alone to face the might of the Zephyrian Empire? Kralthor's voice rumbled through the organic walls like distant thunder. His warriors shifted restlessly, their battle instincts telling them this was too easy, too simple. I come to prevent an embarrassment, Kim Yuna replied calmly, placing a small data pad on the bone table between them. Yours. Kralthor leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. No one had ever spoken to him with such casual disrespect and lived to tell about it. But something in the human's tone made him pause. She was not showing fear or defiance. She was speaking to him like a teacher addressing a student who was about to make a serious mistake. The datapad projected a holographic display that made every warrior in the room step back in shock. Detailed schematics of Zephyrian bioships filled the air, complete with structural weak points, biorhythm patterns, and optimal strike locations. The display showed exactly where to hit each ship type to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. Kralthor's confidence began to crack as the display shifted to show his current fleet formation. Every ship was identified by name, commanding officer, tactical capacity, and current condition. The humans had catalogued his entire war fleet down to individual crew members and weapon systems. "We know about the fungal infections spreading through your ship's nervous systems," Kim Yuna continued in the same conversational tone she might use to discuss the weather. "The contamination started 3 weeks ago in your bioprocessors. Your medical staff has been unable to stop its spread." Several warriors exchanged nervous glances. The fungal problem was classified at the highest levels, known only to ship commanders and senior medical staff. How could this human possibly have such detailed information? "We know Subcommander Vexlan has been questioning your leadership in private communications with other officers," the ambassador went on. "We know your home fleet is currently defending against the hegemony incursion near the Proxima system, leaving you with only second-tier vessels and conscripted crews for this mission." Kralthor felt his world shifting beneath him like sand. Every piece of information the human shared was absolutely accurate. They knew about his military secrets, his political problems, his strategic weaknesses. But this was impossible. The Zephyrians had never encountered humans in battle. There had been no spies, no infiltrators, no captured intelligence. "We also know," Kim Yuna said, her voice growing slightly warmer, "that you are an honorable warrior who values strength above all else. There is no strength in attacking defenseless miners. But there would be great honor in being the first Zephyrian leader to forge an alliance with the species that catalogued your entire military infrastructure without firing a single shot." The chamber fell silent except for the steady pulse of the ship's organic walls. Kralthor stared at the small human woman who had just demonstrated that his greatest military secrets were common knowledge to her people. She had not threatened him or his warriors. She had simply shared information between what she called friends. "How?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We watch," Kim Yuna replied simply. "We learn. We prepare. Your people are magnificent warriors, War Chief. But we are very good students." 6 hours later, the Zephyrian fleet departed Tau Ceti system. War Chief Kralthor had signed both a non-aggression pact and a trade agreement for advanced bioship medical treatments. The galaxy's military analysts spent months trying to understand how a single human had neutralized the sector's most feared war fleet with nothing but conversation and a datapad. The Zephyrians never spoke publicly about what happened in that throne room, but word spread quickly through military channels across the galaxy. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could defeat anyone without fighting them, simply by knowing everything about them first. The Merchant Federation's embargo hit Earth's outer colonies like a hammer blow. Within 48 hours, essential supply ships stopped arriving at human settlements across 3 sectors. Medical supplies, food shipments, and industrial equipment that had flowed freely for months suddenly vanished from the shipping lanes. Federation Trade Minister Kuelnath stood in his luxurious office high above the capital city of Macansha Prime, watching the holographic displays that showed trade routes throughout the galaxy. Red lines indicated blocked shipping lanes, while blue markers showed Federation-controlled checkpoints. Every route to human space now glowed angry red. "The embargo is complete," his assistant reported, her forearms working multiple control panels simultaneously. "No Federation vessel will carry cargo to human colonies. No Federation world will sell supplies to human traders. Their outer settlements will begin experiencing shortages within a week." Kuelnath's satisfaction showed in the pleased color patterns rippling across his translucent skin. The Federation had controlled galactic trade for over 1,000 years through simple economics. They owned the largest cargo fleets, controlled the most efficient shipping routes, and maintained exclusive contracts with the galaxy's major suppliers. Any species that challenged their dominance quickly learned the cost of independence. "Send the ultimatum," Kuelnath ordered. "The humans can accept Federation economic oversight and pay our standard tribute rates, or they can watch their colonies slowly starve on the rim worlds." 300 light-years away, Dr. Song Jiwon received the Federation's message while reviewing supply chain analyses in her modest office aboard the diplomatic station orbiting Alpha Centauri. Unlike the opulent trading halls of Federation worlds, her workspace was spartanly functional. The walls were covered with economic models, resource flow charts, and demographic projections that she had compiled over months of careful research. "They expect us to panic," her assistant Kim Tae-hyun observed as he finished uploading the latest reports from their field operatives. "The Federation has never failed to break a species through economic pressure. They expect us to play by their rules," Song Ji-won replied, her fingers dancing across her tablet's interface. "But we have been studying different rules entirely." She had spent the past 6 months building something the galaxy had never seen before, a complete economic map of every non-Federation world within 10 sectors. Her team had analyzed trade patterns, identified supply bottlenecks, calculated shipping costs, and discovered inefficiencies that had existed for centuries simply because no one had bothered to look for them. "Release the package," she told Tae-hyun. Within minutes, a comprehensive data transmission reached every independent world, mining station, agricultural colony, and manufacturing center in 3 sectors. The package contained something revolutionary: detailed alternative trade routes that completely bypassed Federation middlemen. On the mineral-rich world of Kepler 186f, mining consortium leader Vorth received the human data package while reviewing his company's quarterly losses. For decades, his people had sold their rare earth elements to Federation traders at fixed prices set by Mercantia Prime. The humans showed him something incredible: direct shipping routes to dozens of worlds that needed exactly what Kepler 186f produced, and they were willing to pay twice the Federation rates. "This cannot be accurate," Vorth muttered, cross-referencing the human calculations with his own records. But the numbers checked out perfectly. The Federation had been buying his minerals for 10 credits per ton and selling them for 30 credits per ton to the same customers the humans had identified. Agricultural world Gliese 667c had experienced similar exploitation for generations. Farmer Administrator Kelvia had always assumed her people received fair market prices for their food exports. The human data showed her that Federation traders were marking up her products by 400% before selling them to hungry colonies across the galaxy. The response was immediate and devastating to Federation interests. Within 72 hours, mining consortiums across 5 systems had signed exclusive contracts with human shipping companies. Agricultural worlds discovered they could triple their profits by selling directly to food distributors that the humans had identified. Manufacturing planets learned that human transportation costs were 60% lower than Federation rates because humans had optimized their routes using advanced mathematical models. Trade Minister Kuilnuth watched his 1,000-year economic empire collapse in real time as his communication channels flooded with contract cancellations and partnership terminations. Colony after colony was discovering that they had never actually needed Federation control to prosper. They had simply never been shown the alternatives. "How is this possible?" Kuilnuth demanded, his skin flashing angry orange patterns. "We control the major shipping lanes. We own the largest cargo fleets. We have exclusive agreements with the primary suppliers." His trade analysis team worked frantically to understand what was happening. The humans had not attacked Federation infrastructure or stolen Federation cargo. They had done something far more devastating. They had revealed that the Federation's services were unnecessary. "Sir," his chief analyst reported, her voice shaking, "the humans have created point-to-point shipping routes that are more efficient than our hub-and-spoke system. They have identified supply and demand matches that we never bothered to calculate. They have shown our trading partners that direct relationships are more profitable than going through our brokers." Lee Minute-ho, Earth's junior trade analyst, delivered the final blow during a public broadcast that reached every world in Federation space. His youthful face appeared on screens across hundreds of planets as he spoke with genuine gratitude. "We want to thank the Merchant Federation for their educational embargo," he said with a smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and devastating. "It helped us identify exactly which services the galaxy actually needed, and which were merely traditional." The broadcast included detailed economic projections showing how much each world could save by adopting human-optimized trade relationships. The numbers were staggering. Most Federation client worlds had been paying 30 to 50% more than necessary for basic goods simply because they had never questioned the existing system. Within a month, the Federation's trade monopoly had crumbled completely. Dr. Song Ji-won never gloated, never threatened, never even raised her voice in triumph. She had simply given every world in 3 sectors the information they needed to make better economic decisions for themselves. The galaxy learned its second lesson about human diplomacy that month. When humans went to war, their enemies sometimes did not realize they were fighting until they had already lost. The humans had not destroyed the Federation through force or deception. They had made them irrelevant by offering everyone something better. The Sacred World's theocracy arrived at New Sol Colony with the absolute confidence of zealots who had never encountered a culture they could not convert or conquer. Their massive temple ship, shaped like a crystalline cathedral and glowing with holy light, settled into orbit above the human settlement like a divine judgment made manifest. High Missionary Veltar led a delegation of their most persuasive spiritual leaders down to the colony's surface. Each missionary had spent decades mastering the art of religious conversion, and they had never failed to bring primitive species into the light of divine truth. Their flowing robes shimmered with sacred symbols, and their voices carried the weight of absolute certainty. The humans they expected to find were simple colonists, farmers, and miners who would be awed by displays of theological sophistication. Instead, they found Professor Onari waiting at the spaceport, surrounded by a small team of comparative religion scholars and anthropologists who greeted them with genuine excitement. "We are so honored by your visit," Professor Onari said, her translation device carefully preserving the reverent tone of her words. "We have studied your sacred texts extensively and have so many questions about your beautiful theological framework." The missionaries exchanged pleased glances. Finally, a species that showed proper respect for divine wisdom. This would be easier than they had hoped. Professor Onari led them to a simple conference room where her colleagues had prepared comfortable seating and refreshments. The walls were covered with charts and diagrams showing comparative religious structures from across the galaxy. But what caught the missionaries' attention were the detailed analyses of their own sacred writings, displayed with obvious care and scholarly attention. "Your creation stories are absolutely fascinating," Dr. Yoon Sung-minit began with innocent enthusiasm. "We notice some interesting variations between the first scripture and the Reformed Codex, particularly regarding the origin of consciousness. Could you help us understand how Prophet Zathal's later revelations about soul emergence reconcile with the earlier teachings about pre-existing divine essence?" High Missionary Veltar paused mid-sip of his ceremonial tea. In 300 years of missionary work, no one had ever asked him to explain apparent contradictions in scripture. The faithful simply accepted divine mystery without question. But these humans were looking at him with such genuine scholarly interest that he found himself trying to provide an answer. "Well," he began slowly, "the divine works in ways that transcend simple understanding." "Oh, absolutely," Professor Onari agreed enthusiastically. "That's what makes the mathematical precision in your ceremonial calendars so remarkable. The sacred numbers mentioned in chapter 4 to 7 create such beautiful patterns. Though we're curious why they don't align with the astronomical calculations used in your festival timing. Is this symbolic, or perhaps indicating different calendar systems used by various prophets?" Another missionary, Subdeacon Marketh, leaned forward with interest. He had always wondered about that discrepancy himself but had never dared to question it. The mathematical differences you mention. Could you show us your calculations?" Research Assistant Park Jae-won immediately activated a holographic display showing the sacred numbers laid out in complex mathematical relationships. The beauty of the patterns was undeniable, but so were the inconsistencies when compared to actual astronomical data. "We don't want to suggest anything wrong with your beautiful system," Park Jae-won said carefully. "We're just trying to understand whether the discrepancies indicate symbolic meaning we're missing, or perhaps different measurement systems used in different historical periods." By the third day, something unprecedented was happening in the conference room. The missionary team was spending more time debating theological questions among themselves than preaching to humans. Research assistant Kim So-young had compiled a comprehensive analysis of competing scriptural interpretations, presenting them not as criticisms but as fascinating theological complexity worthy of deeper study. "I never realized how many different ways the seventh revelation could be interpreted," admitted junior missionary Q-Il Van. "When you lay out all the possible meanings side by side like this, it creates so many interesting questions." "Questions are wonderful," Professor Onari said warmly. "They lead to deeper understanding. Tell me, in your experience, how do the common believers on your worlds handle these kinds of theological complexities?" The missionaries looked at each other uncomfortably. The truth was that common believers were not supposed to handle theological complexities at all. They were supposed to accept whatever the priest had told them and never ask questions. Dr. Yoon Sung-minit, sensing their discomfort, quickly changed the subject. "Perhaps you could help us understand the role of doubt in spiritual growth? Your prophet Morthak wrote beautifully about the value of questioning in the third commentary, but this seems to contrast with the emphasis on faith without doubt in the primary texts." "Doubt." Subdeacon Marketh repeated the word as if he had never heard it before. Prophet Morthak wrote about questioning. The humans showed him the relevant passages, which he had read hundreds of times but never truly considered. When viewed in the context the humans provided, The words seemed to suggest that doubt and questioning were actually important parts of spiritual development. Within a week, 3 missionaries had requested extended stays to clarify certain doctrinal questions with their home temples. 2 others had begun writing what they called interpretive supplements to address apparent contradictions in their holy books. The real disaster came when the missionaries returned to the sacred worlds and began sharing their enhanced understanding with their congregations. Suddenly, believers across 17 planets were asking questions that no one had prepared them to ask. Why do the sacred numbers not match the stars? What did Prophet Morthak mean about the value of questioning? How do we reconcile the different creation stories? Religious debates erupted in temples that had known only unquestioned faith for centuries. Priests who had never been challenged found themselves struggling to answer questions they had never considered. Some believers became more devoted as they wrestled with theological complexity, while others began to question whether their leaders truly understood the divine mysteries they claimed to represent. High Priest Morgeth sent an urgent message to Professor Onari after 3 months of growing religious chaos. Please, make them stop asking questions. We never taught them to think about belief, only to believe without thinking. Professor Onari replied with sincere puzzlement, but surely deeper understanding brings one closer to divine truth? We only wanted to learn from your missionaries' wisdom. The theocracy's attempt at conversion had backfired completely. Instead of gaining human souls, they had inadvertently taught their own people to question everything they had previously accepted as divine law. The sacred worlds experienced their first theological renaissance in over a millennium, and their religious leaders. 6 months after first contact, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session that had no precedent in their 1,000-year history. Representatives from 17 major civilizations gathered in the ancient crystalline chamber, their faces bearing expressions that ranged from bewilderment to outright terror. Council Prime Vextar called the session to order, but his usual commanding presence seemed diminished. His blue-scaled hands trembled slightly as he activated the chamber's recording systems. We are here to discuss what many are calling the human problem, he announced, his voice lacking its usual authority. Trade Minister Kuilnuth, whose once mighty federation had been reduced to a handful of struggling worlds, spoke first. His translucent skin flickered with patterns of confusion and fear. They destroyed our economy without firing a single weapon, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They simply gave everyone better information. Better choices. How do you fight an enemy that defeats you by helping your own people? War Chief Kralthor's massive armored frame seemed smaller somehow as he leaned forward in his seat. The greatest military commander in known space looked like a warrior who had lost a battle he never realized he was fighting. They knew everything about our capabilities before we ever met them, he rumbled. Every weakness, every strength, every secret. Not through spying or infiltration, but through simple observation and analysis. They watched us fight others and learned how to defeat us without ever engaging in combat. High Priest Morgetha's voice carried the weight of theological crisis as he added his testimony. They asked questions. Simple, innocent questions that seemed to come from genuine curiosity. But those questions unraveled 1,000 years of religious unity. They made our own people think about beliefs that were meant to be accepted without question. In the observation gallery above the main chamber, Ambassador Kim Yuna sat quietly with her small team. Cultural Attaché Park Minho reviewed his continuously updated notes on each species' psychological profiles, while Strategic Advisor Lee Hanna quietly added new information to their comprehensive files on galactic power structures. The humans had been invited to observe this emergency session, though many council members seemed uncomfortable with their presence. They appeared so ordinary, so unremarkable compared to the towering aliens around them. Yet every being in the chamber knew that these 3 small figures represented something unprecedented in galactic history. The fundamental problem, Vextar continued, struggling to find words for concepts his species had never needed to consider, is that we cannot fight them using any method we understand. They do not conquer territory. They do not demand tribute. They do not threaten violence. They simply offer alternatives that our own people find more appealing than what we provide. Crystalline Consortium representative Geltar chimed her agreement, her glass-like body resonating with harmonics of frustration. They solved our biocontamination problem in exchange for mineral extraction rights. A fair trade that benefited both parties. But somehow, in helping us, they also demonstrated that they understood our technology better than we did ourselves. Dr. Song Jiwon rose from the observation gallery and requested permission to address the council. Her small human form descended to the main floor, where she looked impossibly tiny surrounded by beings that towered over her. Yet as she began to speak, Her calm confidence filled the vast chamber. "Honored council members," she said gently, "I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about our intentions and methods." She activated a small holographic projector that displayed the current state of the galaxy. The image showed trade flowing more freely than it had in centuries, military conflicts at their lowest levels in recorded history, religious and cultural exchange reaching unprecedented heights, and economic prosperity spreading to previously marginalized worlds. "You fear us because you assume we have been playing the same game as everyone else," Lihanna explained, joining her colleague on the chamber floor. "The game of dominance, control, and manipulation. But we have been playing an entirely different game." "What game?" demanded Kralthor, though his voice carried more curiosity than anger. "The game of understanding," Kim Yuna replied, her smile gentle but somehow still unsettling to the assembled representatives. "Every species, every culture, every individual perspective adds to our comprehension of what is possible in this galaxy." Park Minho activated his tablet, displaying humanity's comprehensive cultural database. "We study you because you fascinate us. Each civilization has developed unique solutions to universal problems. Your military strategies, your economic systems, your spiritual beliefs, your social structures, they all represent different approaches to existence that we can learn from." "But that makes you more dangerous than any conqueror," Vextar protested, his voice rising with emotion. "Conquerors want things we understand: territory, resources, slaves, tribute. We know how to deal with those desires. But you want something we have never encountered before. You want to know us better than we know ourselves." "Yes," Kim Yuna acknowledged without hesitation. "Exactly. And in return, we offer you the same opportunity, the chance to understand yourselves, your neighbors, and your galaxy more completely than ever before." The chamber fell into a silence so complete that the only sound was the quiet hum of the ancient building systems. The representatives of galactic civilization sat frozen, trying to process implications that challenged everything they thought they knew about power and conflict. "What happens to us?" asked High Priest Morgeth, voicing the question that haunted every leader present. "What happens to our civilizations, our cultures, our ways of life?" "They evolve," Lihanna said simply. "They grow. They become more than they were before. Change is not destruction, it is development." Dr. Song Jiwon stepped forward, her expression earnest and sincere. "We do not want to rule you or replace you. We want to learn from you and help you learn from each other. The galaxy is vast enough for countless different approaches to existence. Diversity makes us all stronger." The vote for humanity's full membership in the Galactic Council was unanimous, though the reasons were not what Earth's diplomats had originally expected. The galaxy's leaders voted not from admiration or respect, but from a growing realization that resistance was not just futile, it was unnecessary. Council Prime Vextar announced the results with a voice that carried both defeat and strange relief. "The humans have shown us that our greatest enemy was never each other, but our own ignorance. They offer to replace fear with knowledge, conflict with cooperation, isolation with understanding." As the session concluded, the assembled representatives began to understand the truth that would reshape galactic civilization. Humanity's greatest weapon was not superior technology or military might. It was their genuine, insatiable curiosity about everyone else, combined with an unprecedented ability to use that knowledge constructively rather than destructively. The galaxy had feared Earth's diplomats because they represented something unprecedented in the history of interstellar relations.